This is Pat Tully of the Ketchikan Public Library, and this is Reading Aloud. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be reading mostly poetry from the First World War. It's been a little bit over 100 years since the end of that war, and the poetry of that time period from the beginning of the war through the end of the war and beyond really gives a feel for how devastating it was to the hopes that were contemplated when the 20th century first began. So we will start in August of 1914. The war has just begun, and this is actually not a poem. It is Lord Kitchener's instructions to the British soldier. You are ordered abroad as a soldier of the King to help our French comrades against the invasion of a common enemy. You have to perform a task which will need your courage, your energy, your patience. Remember that the honor of the British Army depends on your individual conduct. It will be your duty not only to set an example of discipline and perfect steadiness under fire, but also to maintain the most friendly relations with those whom you are helping in this struggle. The operations in which you are engaged will, for the most part, take place in a friendly country, and you can do your own country no better service than in showing yourself in France and Belgium in the true character of a British soldier. Be invariably courteous, considerate, and kind. Never do anything likely to injure or destroy property, and always look upon looting as a disgraceful act. You are sure to meet with a welcome and to be trusted. Your conduct must justify that welcome and that trust. Your duty cannot be done unless your health is sound, so keep constantly on your guard against any excesses. In this new experience, you may find temptations both in wine and women. You must entirely resist both temptations, and while treating all women with perfect courtesy, you should avoid any intimacy. Do your duty bravely. Fear God, honor the King. Kitchener, Field Marshal. The first couple poems I'm going to be reading are men who were alive during the war but not necessarily serving in it. The first poem is called Pro Patria by Sir Owen Seaman, who was, at the time that the war began, a poet in his 50s. So, Pro Patria. England, in this great fight to which you go, because where honor calls you, go you must. Be glad, whatever comes, at least to know you have your quarrel just. Peace was your care before the nation's bar, her cause you pleaded and her ends you sought. But not for her sake, being what you are, could you be bribed or bought. Others may spurn the pledge of land to land, may with the brute sword stain a gallant past, but by the seal to which you set your hand, thank God you still stand fast. Forth then to front that peril of the deep, with smiling lips and in your eyes the light, steadfast and confident of those who keep their storied scutcheons bright. And we whose burden is to watch and wait, high-hearted ever, strong in faith and prayer, we ask what offering we may consecrate, what humble service share. To steel our souls against the lust of ease, to find our welfare in the general good, to hold together merging all degrees in one wide brotherhood. To teach that he who saves himself is lost, to bear in silence though our hearts may bleed, to spend ourselves and never count the cost, for others' greater need. To go our quiet ways, subdued and sane, to hush all vulgar clamor of the street, with level calm to face alike the strain of triumph or defeat. This be our part, for so we serve you best, so best confirm their prowess and their pride, your warrior sons to whom in this high test our fortunes we confide. And now we move to Robert Service, Robert Service was 41 when the war broke out, and he tried to enlist, but he was turned down. He became an ambulance driver with the Red Cross during the war, and he wrote Rhymes of a Red Cross Man in 1916 and dedicated it to his brother Albert, who was killed in the war. So this poem is called A Song of Winter Weather. It isn't the foe that we fear. It isn't the bullets that whine. It isn't the business career of a shell or a bust of a mine. It isn't the snipers who seek to nip our young hopes in the bud. No, it isn't the guns, and it isn't the Huns. It's the mud, mud, mud. It isn't the melee we mind. That often is rather good fun. It isn't the shrapnel we find, obtrusive when rained by the ton. It isn't the bounce of the bombs that gives us a positive pain. It's the strafing we get when the weather is wet. It's the rain, rain, rain. It isn't because we lack grit. We shrink from the horrors of war. We don't mind the battle a bit. In fact, it is what we are for. It isn't the rum jars and things make us wish we were back in the fold. It's the fingers that freeze and the boreal breeze. It's the cold, cold, cold. Oh, the rain, the mud, and the cold, the mud, and the rain. With weather at zero, it's hard for a hero, from language that's rude to refrain. With porridgey muck to the knees, with sky that's a pouring a flood. Sure, the worst of our foes are the pains and the woes of the rain, the cold, and the mud. And again, Robert Service, this is a slightly sadder poem called Young Fellow, My Lad. Where are you going, young fellow, my lad, on this glittering morn of May? I'm going to join the colors, Dad. They're looking for men, they say. But you're only a boy, young fellow, my lad. You aren't obliged to go. I'm 17 and a quarter, Dad, and ever so strong, you know. So you're off to France, young fellow, my lad, and you're looking so fit and bright. I'm terribly sorry to leave you, Dad, but I feel that I'm doing right. God bless you and keep you, young fellow, my lad. You're all of my life, you know. Don't worry, I'll soon be back, dear Dad, and I'm awfully proud to go. Why don't you write, young fellow, my lad? I watch for the post each day. And I miss you so, and I'm awfully sad, and it's months since you went away. And I've had the fire in the parlor lit, and I'm keeping it burning bright, till my boy comes home, and here I sit, into the quiet night. What is the matter, young fellow, my lad? No letter again today. Why did the postman look so sad, and sigh as he turned away? I hear them tell we've gained new ground, but a terrible price we've paid. God grant, my boy, that you're safe and sound, but oh, I'm afraid, afraid. They've told me the truth, young fellow, my lad. You'll never come back again. Oh, God, the dreams and the dreams I've had, and the hopes I've nursed in vain. For you passed in the night, young fellow, my lad, and you proved in the cruel test of the screaming shell and the battle hell that my boy was one of the best. So you'll live, young fellow, my lad, in the gleam of the evening star, and the wood note wild and the laugh of the child, and all sweet things that are. And you'll never die, my wonderful boy, while life is noble and true. For all our beauty and hope and joy, we will owe to our lads like you. We come to a few of the poets who served in the war. The first is John McCrae. He was actually a Canadian doctor who served in a hospital in France, and he died there of pneumonia in 1918. And I'm sure you will recognize this poem. It's called In Flanders Field. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amidst the gun below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. And now we move on to Robert Graves. Robert Graves enlisted in 1914 at the age of 19. He served throughout the war, and he actually didn't die until 1985 at the age of 90. So this first poem of his is called The Shadow of Death. Here's an end to my art. I must die, and I know it. With battle murder at my heart, sad death for a poet. Oh, my songs never sung, and my plays to darkness blown. I am still so young, and my life was my own. Some bad fairy stole the baby I nursed. Was this my pretty little soul, this changeling accursed? To fight and kill is wrong, to stay home wronger. O soul, little play and song, I may father no longer. Here's an end to my art, I must die and I know it, with battle murder at my heart, sad death for a poet. Also by Robert Graves, called Limbo. After a week spent under raining skies, in horror, mud, and sleeplessness, a week of bursting shells, of blood and hideous cries, and the ever-watchful sniper, where the reek of death offends the living, but poor dead can't sleep, must lie awake with the horrid sound that roars and whirls and rattles overhead. All day, all night, and jars and tears the ground. When rats run, big as kittens, to and fro, they dart and scuffle with their horrid fare. And then one night relief comes, and we go miles back into the sunny cornland, where babies like tickling, and where tall white horses draw the plow leisurely in quiet courses. Robert Graves again, Big Words. I've whined of coming death, but now no more. It's weak and most ungracious. For, say I, though still a boy, if years are counted, why, I've lived those years from roof to cellar floor, and feel like graybeards touching their fourscore, ready so soon as need comes to die. And I'm satisfied. For winning confidence in those quiet days of peace, poised sickly on the precipice slide of Lilwig Crag by Snowdon, and in war finding it firmlier with me than before, winning a faith in the wisdom of God's ways that once I lost, finding it justified even in this chaos, winning love that stays and warms the heart like wine at Eastertide. Having earlier tried false loves in plenty, oh, my cup of praise brims over, and I know I'll feel small sorrow, confess no sins, and make no weak delays, if death ends all and I must die tomorrow. But on the fire step, waiting to attack, he cursed, prayed, sweated, wished the proud words back. And finally, the last poem by Robert Graves, called Over the Brazier. What life to lead and where to go after the war, after the war. We'd often talked this way before, but I still see the brazier glow that April night, still feel the smoke and stifling pungency of burning coke. I'd thought a cottage in the hills, North Wales, a cottage full of books, pictures and brass and cozy nooks, and comfortable broad windowsills, flowers in the garden, walls all white. I'd live there peacefully and dream and write. But Willie said, No, home's no good. Old England's quite a hopeless place. I've lost all feeling for my race. But France has given me heart and blood enough to last me all my life. I'm off to Canada with my wee wife. Come with us, Mac, old thing, but Mac drawled, no, a coral isle for me, a warm green jewel in the South Sea. There's merit in a lumber shack, and labor is a grand thing, but give me my hot beach and my coconut. So then we built and stocked for Willie a log hut, and for Mac a calm rockabye cradle on a palm. Idyllic dwellings, but this silly mad war has now wrecked both. And what better hopes has my little cottage got? July 1915. So we're moving now to Siegfried Sassoon. He was a young man who joined early and was brave throughout the war. By 1917, however, still enlisted, he became vocal in opposition to the war. He did survive the war and actually died in 1967. So the first poem by Sassoon is called Attack. At dawn the ridge emerges, massed and done, in the wild purple of the glowering sun, smoldering through spouts of drifting smoke that shroud the menacing scarred slope, and one by one tanks creep and topple forward to the wire. The barrage roars and lifts, then clumsily bowed with bombs and guns and shovels and battle gear, men jostle and climb to meet the bristling fire. Lines of gray, muttering faces, masked with fear. They leave their trenches, going over the top, while time ticks blank and busy on their wrists, and hope, with furtive eyes and grappling fists, flounders in mud. Oh, Jesu, make it stop. Another poem by Sassoon called Does It Matter? Does it matter, losing your legs? For people will always be kind, and you need not show that you mind when others come in after football to gobble their muffin and eggs. Does it matter, losing your sight? There's such splendid work for the blind, and people will always be kind as you sit on the terrace remembering and turning your face to the light. Do they matter, those dreams from the pit? You can drink and forget and be glad, and people won't say that you're mad, for they'll know that you fought for your country, and no one will worry a bit. Finally, Aftermath, again by Siegfried Sassoon. Have you forgotten yet? For the world's events have rumbled on since those gagged days, like traffic checked a while at the crossing of city ways, and the haunted gap in your mind has filled with thoughts that flow like clouds in the lit heavens of life, and you're a man reprieved to go, taking your peaceful share of time with joy to spare, but the past is just the same, and war's a bloody game. Have you forgotten yet? Look down and swear by the slain of the war that you will never forget. Do you remember the dark months you held the sector at Mammoth's? The nights you watched and wired and dug and piled sandbags on parapets? Do you remember the rats and the stench of corpses rotting in front of the front line trench? And dawn coming dirty white and chill with a hopeless rain? Do you ever stop and ask, is it all going to happen again? Do you remember that hour of din before the attack? And the anger, the blind compassion that seized and shook you then? As you peered at the doomed and haggard faces of your men? Do you remember the stretcher cases lurching back, with dying eyes and lolling heads? Those ashen gray masks of the lads who once were keen and kind and gay? Have you forgotten yet? Look up and swear by the green of the spring that you will never forget. And finally, we move to Wilfred Owen, who was a very young soldier who was killed in action just a week before the war ended in November of 1918. and you will recognize this poem, no doubt. The title is Dulce and Decorum Est. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks. Knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropped softly behind. Gas, gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear, at every jolt, the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest, to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. The last line of that poem is actually from the Roman poet Horace, who wrote around the 1st century BC. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a good week.